and a huge warm welcome to my guest today, Kierran Pearce, who I'm really excited to chat to about the Multi-Schools Trust. But first, let me tell you a little bit about Kierran. Kierran is the lead for the Multi-Schools Council. He has 17 years experience of working within SEND education, teaching in 2 special needs schools, becoming a SEND governor at his formal secondary school, and creating the MSc model, which is now a full-time funded role at the local authority. Kierran's passion for SEND education is driven by his work in special education and young people expressing their desire for better awareness within society. The MSc model now works with over 700 schools, has over 200 young ambassadors, and regularly engages with our young people. The MSc work led to a national award in 2024 from the NHS for its approach to co-production, and Kierran has also been commissioned to lead on a regional network named Voices of the East. In December last year, the work of the MSc was captured in a national case study published by ISOS as a part of the What Works in SEND agenda, and is forming part of a business case to roll this work out further. What an incredible journey he has been on, and I can't wait to hear more. So without further ado, let's welcome Kierran to the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Lucy. That was a lovely introduction. And I'm excited to be on here as well.
It's incredible, the work that you've been doing, and it has happened on so many levels as well. You've achieved so much with this. So I'm really looking forward to hearing a lot more about what it is and where it's going. But first, can you just tell us a little bit about what got you first involved in SEND education?
So, I mean, it was a bit by kind of chance and luck, really. I was really lucky to work at a brilliant specialist school in North Essex, and it was in the paper, a job for kind of a sports coordinator, which was at the time just up the road from where I was living. And I went in there kind of not knowing anything, if I'm really honest, Lucy, around special educational needs, autism, other differences. So really, it was just by luck, but once I got involved, I knew pretty quickly that it's something that I wanted to do for a long period of time.
Yeah, you find that a lot, don't you, within this kind of field, that people stumble upon the roles and then love it and then never leave because they find the real passion for wanting to be part of that community and helping our young people. So that's quite a common response I get to a question within kind of the SEND education, is people stumble upon it and fall in love.
Yeah, it really was that. And I think I was lucky at the time as well. The school that I started to work at was kind of on a journey as well in terms of growing. So, when I first started, there were 70 children, but by the time I'd left kind of to run the multi-schools, there was over 200. So yeah, it was a great time to kind of join as well.
Yeah, what a great start into that way of working as well. So what is the MSc? What can you tell us about it, and how did the idea come about?
Yeah, so building on what I've just said about kind of how my SEND journey started, while working at the school, I was in charge of the school council, and a young girl called Charlie, who is still involved with the Multi-Schools Council all these years later, she basically said that, other young people and other adults didn't really understand special educational needs. So although they did at the school, she said, well, one day I have to leave and my friends have to leave. And I said, okay, well, how are we going to change that, Charlie? And she said, we need to be educating other young people about special educational needs. So that's kind of where it started and why it started. And then it's been on a journey ever since to kind of get more young people involved, more schools and more local communities. But really what we're passionate about, Lucy, is making sure we stay true to why we set it up in the first place. So it really is about young people and their voices and getting that awareness out there.
I love that. So what kind of things do you do as part of the school's council?
So the easiest way to describe it now is we've got kind of 3 pillars or 3 core pillars of our work.
Okay.
So I am going to miss stuff today because otherwise, we would be on here for hours and hours. But to explain it to people who are listening who maybe haven't heard of what we do. So pillar 1 is our engagement meetings, which young people have recently in Essex renamed share zones because they said they sound a bit more exciting than just a meeting.
Fair point.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea of that is that any school can bring, or any setting can bring young people along to those meetings, which currently happen in 14 different areas across Essex once a term.
Okay.
And those meetings are an opportunity for young people to discuss topics that they are passionate about. So that could be anything from mental health to global warming. We've covered loads of stuff over the years. And then following those meetings, it's my job and the team's job to kind of work with schools to see if there's anything that can kind of be implemented or worked on based on what young people tell us, or even within the local authority, if there's things that we can feed back into the local system. So that's kind of like the tangible outcomes from it. But what I believe is most powerful about it is that what we're doing with those meetings is you're bringing young people with all different experiences from all different backgrounds and with all different abilities together in the same room. Now, that might sound really simplistic, but you get a lot of young people, if we think back to why we started it, who might go to a special school and then their opportunity to socialise and meet with other young people is very rare. Yeah. And it's the same the other way around. So we can't expect for the understanding to develop unless we're actually kind of collaborate and bring young people together. So if I just give one very quick example, a meeting that always stays in my head is we held it at a big special school in Chelmsford, and we had young people coming from a mainstream secondary. And I remember them walking in and being like, we didn't know young people in special schools could talk. Like that was their first, comment. And that highlights to me, why we need to break down those barriers and give opportunities. So obviously there's the outcomes in terms of projects, etc., but the meetings are a chance for young people to come together. So that's just pillar one. Do you want me to carry on with the other pillars as well while we're in the flow, or do you want me to stop for a moment?
Let's just stop for a moment and talk about pillar one, because I love this. I love having that opportunity, of bringing together young people to actively give their voice, which is so important. And a lot of opportunities for young people to have a voice is quite tokenistic. So I love that this is really tangible time for them to come together and talk about it. But I especially love what you're saying about educating young people about all of the diversity out there. And, how can we expect them to understand? How can we expect them to support and help others if they're never exposed to the experiences of other people? So I think that element of pillar one is really interesting to me, because that isn't often done. That kind of education, how can you support your peers in any kind of struggles and challenges that they have? And that comment that was made to you about, I didn't even know that they could speak, that must be a really common thread through a lot of young people's minds who aren't exposed to other people's experiences. And that must bring some real value to the conversations that you have in those rooms. I mean, for individuals that do have quite complex SEND needs and who may not be able to verbally contribute, is there a way that they still are able to join in those discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of young people with more complex needs who maybe not, or even non or pre-verbal, so we work very hard with the schools because ultimately they know their young people best. So we encourage that if they're already using kind of strategies and resources to ensure that they are part of the meeting as well. There's no point us just creating stuff for the sake of it, because actually for a lot of those young people the support needs to be personalized and individualized. So we make that point that the meetings are accessible in terms of we can adapt the way we ask questions. It's all about the preparation as well, so making sure schools have in advance the agendas and bits so they can prep. But also, I mean, again, we said we might veer off, but it links. There's various projects that we're doing more of now. So if I think about how we've developed into Southend, Faye, who leads our work there, has done a brilliant project recently, which is called Bags About Me, which is specifically working with young people with complex needs. And is basically an insight really into them, how they communicate, the things they like, the things they enjoy. And you can evolve that to then enable them to engage in that kind of feedback. So I think, would I say that we're kind of able to differentiate and able to get other young people involved? Yes, I think we are, but could we get better at it? absolutely all the time. So it's a really good question, because I think we need to constantly think about how we're making sure that the meetings are inclusive.
And it's funny because I had a conversation this morning actually with a researcher who researches within inclusion, and we were saying about how difficult it is to get that complete inclusion. It's a bit idealistic to think that we can include everybody all of the time in every single way. Inclusion looks different for each individual person and their experience. And we are constantly learning. We have to try things. If it works, brilliant. We look at how we can make a bigger impact. If it doesn't work, what didn't work, and how can we flex and change it? So I think that's the important part, is not kind of saying, oh, we don't know what to do in this space, so therefore we're not going to do anything, is having the confidence to try new things, but also, like you've just touched upon there, to acknowledge that when things are already in place, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to find out what has been working for that young person and how can we bring that in. So I think that's really important. But inclusion is a really complex thing in itself, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's multi kind of, dimensional, isn't it, in terms of, doesn't just mean one thing. It's going to be very individual. I think you're right. There are massive challenges, but actually there is also the flip side of it, where maybe you need people to be willing to want to be inclusive. Yeah. I am a positive person. I'd like to think that most people want to be, and even if it doesn't look like they want to be, it might just be because they're not sure how to be. And so that's why, if I link it back to the kind of more simplistic stuff I was saying, that's why that understanding is really important, because you build that can open people's eyes and minds to thinking, oh, actually, we might have always done it like this, but if we do it like this, X will then be able to be involved. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Okay, so what's the next pillar?
Yeah, so pillar 2 is our school delivery work. So this kind of evolved from the first pillar, in terms of, okay, it's great, we're doing some meetings, young people are coming along, but actually we need more consistent messages going into schools. So what we started to do was develop sessions for young people around specific themes. So we run an autism awareness workshop for other young people that has been designed by young people who have autism. So it's coming from their words.
I love that.
Yeah, their minds, and the types of things they want their peers to kind of understand and learn about.
Brilliant.
We do the same for ADHD. So again, young people with ADHD have designed that. And they're adaptable to all age groups as well. And then we also run SEND awareness assemblies, mental health awareness assemblies, and anti-bullying assemblies. Again, all have been designed with young people, and they kind of give an overview and a flavour into the things that young people want us to kind of talk about. Below that, we also have our staff training as well, because as young people pointed out, a real need for other young people to understand these differences, but actually they felt that staff needed to as well, which is possibly a reflection on kind of how teacher training is set up at the moment. But, again, maybe we'll come on to that. And therefore, what our sessions do is they, I guess, give a context from young people's perspectives, again, of what could help them in their environments, and with staff understanding. So currently in Essex, we have a speech, language and communication session. We have a mental health awareness session, and we also have a new understanding neurodivergence session. In the past, we've ran an ADHD session and also an autism session. However, we've now worked with the local authority to embed those messages into what they're delivering across the county as well. And they have, greater capacity to do that. So yeah, it's just about getting those messages in. There's other things within Pillar 2 then. So we run other projects such as the Good Practice Seekers project, which is basically, I love this, a framework that young people have designed around what inclusion looks and feels like to them. And then young people get some training where they then go and look at their school and score how inclusive it is.
Oh, wow.
And then basically set challenges to the senior leaders to see if there's things that they can do to make it even more inclusive. In the past as well, we've had other schools visit others. So then young people have gone into other schools and scored them and given feedback, which is great. And young people, Lucy, are constantly telling me that hashtags are the cool thing. And their hashtag for this project was hashtag better than Ofsted. And I love that. Because I think it is. Because it's coming from young people and what they feel and think and see. So that's that. And then the final thing just to mention on Pillar 2 is we also have an awards programme, which is basically trying to tie all of that together. So we've now got a bronze, silver, gold award for schools. And what we do to kind of award that is we assess how young people have been involved in their school community and had their voices heard based on the things we do. So, for example, if we're going in and delivering an autism workshop, that's kind of your bronze. Great, you've got us in, you're open to that, you're starting that. But silver and gold is what a difference is that actually making? Mm-hmm. There's no point us coming in if it's not going to have an impact. So we use the awards program to capture that.
There's so much I love about Pillar 2. Well, I love all of it. I absolutely love all of it. And it really is the embodiment of collaborative and participatory working with young people. And that is amazing. Again, reiterating the point that some of this work can really fall foul to just being tokenistic, and this is really demonstrating that it's not. They are woven into every element, from design to delivery to feedback to impact to assessing one another and going into other schools. It really is fantastic, Kierran, what you're doing.
Thank you.
My question on this is around that involvement of the young people in actually designing the training. What does that look like? Do you get together and have a workshop? Like, how do they feed into the actual designing of the training going forward?
So when it started, it was in-person workshops with young people, kind of telling us what's needed. And then over the years, it's developed because we've expanded so much. And I'll talk about Pillar 3 in a moment, but where we've got our ambassadors and where they're so spread, obviously trying to meet in person doesn't work for everyone, and travel, all of that. So what we've then done is kind of every year we then meet with, let's say, our autism ambassadors to kind of update, look at the content that we're delivering, to keep them involved, to make sure that we're always evolving. So if I think back to when we first wrote the kind of awareness sessions for young people, we didn't talk about masking, for example, whereas over the last few years, that's something that young people have spoken about more because we spoke to more young people. So now we have a bit more in there about masking and potentially sometimes the difference between boys and girls. So that's kind of how it works. And then I guess the other element is where we've been lucky to kind of start working more closely with the local authority. We've obviously got kind of specialists there as well, so we can work with them to make sure that it links to the messages that they're giving and there's that kind of continuity. But in terms of that initial design, it was literally, we always say we start with a blank piece of paper. And I think that's really key with young people because as adults, we come with our own preconceptions, our own things that have influenced us,
Of course.
And so I think it's really important you start with that blank piece of paper and you let children grow it. Of course, there are times where you're going to need to support them and make sure that it's, in a kind of format that is going to be presentable and able for people to understand. But actually, it should be rooted in the messages that young people want to get across.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it's a collaboration, isn't it? It's not just purely from them either. It's important to have that balance and that, lived experience, knowledge and expertise from the adults around the table that can feed and make their ideas become that reality, and in that transferable format that can access all of the people that it needs to. So it's that collaborative working element, which is so, so important. But it starts with them, which is great because, they're the experts. They know what they're talking about. Don't tell them we said that, but they know what they're talking about. They're in charge.
No, we do. I am that, but I do tell them. I tell them they're in charge. It's their model. That's how I see it. And obviously, we help run it, but without them, the model wouldn't exist. So we need them to drive it forwards. Yeah.
Was it really hard to kind of recruit I don't know if recruit's the right term to use here, but to get the young people on board? And how do you go about kind of putting it out there? We're looking for young people to get involved in something like this.
Do you know what? I'll be really honest. No, it hasn't, because I think the way the young people have kind of created the multi-schools is it's all about acceptance. So I think it's just kind of happened naturally. Now, maybe I'm only saying that because I've been involved with it from the start. So it feels natural to me. But from my perspective, it just feels like, we've been able to start engaging with different schools. Young people have heard what we've done and they've been excited and infused by it, because in a classroom, when we've delivered a session, the amount of times where either in the session or after session, we've had a young girl or young boy come up to us and say, that's me, or, I feel like that, or I want to be involved. And, it's not always those that you might expect. And what I mean by that is they might be the quiet one at the back, but actually they've just heard something, a light bulb that's gone, that's me. So I think that hasn't been a challenge. I think if I'm being honest, what has been more of a challenge, I guess, is initially engaging schools and getting the value across to schools of why this is important. Schools have a lot to deal with, but they are in some ways the gatekeepers to ensuring we can reach the children. So we have to get the buy-in from them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the adults are the problem, not the children.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying problem, but I'm joking. But they can put barriers up because of other pressures. It might not be seen as a priority, and that's something that I try and talk about a lot as well. But yeah, in terms of the young people, your question about has it been hard to recruit? No, they've wanted to get involved.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I say it in jest that we know how hard schools are working and how much they have from pressure from externally, internally. Our teachers are doing a fantastic job with the resources and the support that they have access to. So, it is incredibly hard to work with schools when they're already so overloaded. So it's even more impressive that you have so many people involved in what you're doing and wanting to make that difference, because that makes all the difference to our young people's experience. And I guess as well, and this probably leads into your third pillar that you were talking about, in that it's young people sharing and talking with other young people. So it's not adults standing there and saying, X, Y, and Z. So those young people that come up to you and say, oh, that's me, and I can really see that, they're seeing that within other young people. And I think there's a lot to be said for children working and teaching with children.
Absolutely. That peer-to-peer understanding is so powerful. And eventually, that's how we want the model to look in every area, is that you've got, young people delivering sessions to other young people where appropriate and where they feel comfortable, because, they seem to respond so much better to people closer to their own age, people who they know, like you just said, are experiencing very similar things to themselves. So it's so powerful. And I think part of going back to that inclusion word and bits, I think part of creating that is by letting young people support each other in ways as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So pillar 3 is the ambassadors, you said?
Yes, it is. So a real kind of key point to our model. So Charlie, who I mentioned at the start, was our first ever ambassador. And I mean, she's brilliant. She kind of helped us kind of understand why we need ambassadors, and has gone on and is now in university and is doing amazing, but still involved with the multi-schools, which is lovely.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, it's so good. So basically the ambassadors are young people who get involved to challenge negative perceptions, either in their settings or outside. So any young person can get involved. Either they apply themselves, so they might write to us, draw a picture, do a video, and tell us why they'd want to be involved. Or if we're going into the schools or holding our share zones, we obviously meet incredible young people. We will then write a personalised letter to invite them to be an ambassador.
Wow.
Which again is just powerful in itself. That I know that they then feel they've been recognised and, I'm going to get involved. So as you mentioned at the start, just over 200 ambassadors now, mainly in Essex, but where we started to expand, some beyond. And when they join us, they get to choose what they want to be involved in. So people who have heard us talk about the multi-schools before will say there is no criteria. Don't like the word criteria. Any young person can be involved, and it's based on their terms. So if they want to get involved in everything and join every meeting and, do lots, great. If they just want to be an ambassador, sit back, know that they're ambassador, and then even in 3 years' time want to then get involved in a meeting, that's fine. It's based on when they're ready. So I think it's that recognition, first of all. They then get to meet other young people, like you say, learn from each other. And now we do a lot online, as I briefly mentioned. So we have our 19 working groups at the moment, which we're kind of playing around with. And then, so we have one on autism, one on tics and Tourette's, for example, lots of variation.
Okay.
We meet with them, again, similar to the share zones. They come up with different projects and ideas we then might run, or again, it's a great opportunity to link their thoughts and feedback into the system, whether that's education or health. And then the final thing with them is, if the local area are maybe redesigning a service or creating a new one, they're the groups of young people that they will then work with to make sure that it's kind of in line with their thoughts and feelings, basically.
Okay, so there's lots of opportunity for it not just to kind of be tied into the schools and the education linked with the MSc, but actually wider conversations and projects and that can lean on those young people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the longer standing ambassadors or those that have really been with us for a long period of time, they have gone on to kind of work with other kind of participation groups or other projects. And that's what we want as well, because, it's about all working together. There's some fantastic youth groups out there. And, if we can link them into other groups as well, that's what we want to do. It's kind of like give them that confidence, develop that sense of belonging and that sense of I can do this, and then let them fly and go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How do you keep them engaged, like such a big cohort of people, and having to do it online to reach more people, and rightly so, but how do you keep that conversation meaningful and keep them engaged in something?
So I guess it links back to, it needs to be things that they are interested in. So we put the emphasis on, when you join, it's because you want to maybe make a change, or you're passionate about it, and then you only choose what you're interested in. So that helps right from the start. The meetings, again, are based around things that they want to talk about. So sometimes, it's happened on an occasion, we'll get sent something, we'll ask our ambassadors if they're interested. They might say, no, thank you. That's not up our street. So, it has to be something that they want to engage in, without repeating myself too much. I also think it's about our approach as well, having that enthusiasm with them, knowing them as individuals. I try and pride ourselves on the fact that we need to know all of our ambassadors really well, because, they're not just rocking up, giving their views and going. It's great. It's great to know about the dog at home, or their favourite food, or all those little things, which, again, people might listen and think, they're just simple things, but they're not. They're really important, because they're human beings and they need to be valued and get a sense of, wow, like they're really listening to us in every kind of layer of listening to us, not just the feedback. So I think that's how we do it. And sometimes it's really hard to get across, because it's almost like I want to say to people, come and look, like come and see, and then you can just see it, because trying to describe it sometimes is quite difficult. You almost need to see it to believe it. But I just think it's being open and aware of each individual. So like our communication styles are going to be different for the kind of diverse group of young people we work with.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I wonder, how does the element of, obviously they are young people, so you must have to involve their parents with this to a certain extent. How does that work?
Yeah, so that their parents are key. So I'll be honest, when it works more successfully is if we've got the engagement with the parents as well.
Yeah,
it is harder if we don't have that. But that's why we have the 3 pillars, because even if we can't, actively engage with the parents, we've still got the ability to then see the young person in the school or at a share zone. What it does mean is that they can't always then get involved in as much, but we wouldn't then say, oh, we can't work with you. We would continue working with them. And ultimately, they're going to become young adults themselves as well. So our hope is we stay connected, and then they can make those choices and have the ability to get involved when they're older as well. But, I have to say, across the board, some amazing parents as well who really want to kind of work with us and enable the young people to get involved. And also, we don't have parents talking over they understand that our concept is about listening to young people. Some of the parents we know want to say a lot as well, and that there's absolutely a place for that. But we're not that place, because we're about young people and the young people having their voice. So you're right to mention them, because there are some amazing parents that have enabled their young people to get involved as well.
For an organisation that is so focused on young people's voices, how do you manage the voices of the adults within that in terms of driving the organisation forward? You've got the students, but the schools, the local authorities, the people running what you're doing. How do you balance that with the young people's voices and still retain that level of inclusion?
It's drip by drip. It's really believing in what we do. I hope it comes across that this isn't just us saying, oh, you should listen to the young people. It's us saying, like, you need to. Like, it's not, you mentioned the word tokenistic, and I've seen examples of that. So I think it's about showing the value in it. And I feel like we have to keep doing that constantly. Again, I'm not just saying it to sound positive. I have seen a shift especially in the last few years especially in the local authority. Everything now does seem to be that want to engage with young people, and the fact that we've got, the platform and the model here, it's great. Schools, again, like I say, I'm seeing a shift in terms of them recognizing the importance of making sure they listen to young people, especially we know, the stresses and strains on the system. So there is a shift. I think it's also about not getting frustrated about overly frustrated about the ones that aren't listening, because then you can miss the ones that are. So my kind of concept and idea is that, you work really hard with those that are getting it, which is probably where we're at, and do want to engage. You get louder and louder with that. And the ones that can't ignore it. And you turn it over bit by bit. And I think we are doing that bit by bit at the moment. So I think we did stage 1. I think we've now got a model where people believe in it and people are invested. Stage 2, we're starting to turn those heads now. And stage 3 will be eventually, hopefully, we're much stronger on, we're having another conversation where we've got so many more people who are, it's almost like, why aren't the others? Because everybody else is. So, I think it's drip by drip, being patient, and also focusing on where it's going well, not just on where it isn't.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And I think for something as big as this, it would need to be worked in that kind of procedural way of step 1, step 2, and gradually grow it. Because I think if you go all in, it doesn't have the same impact. So you have to kind of build that foundation, especially because you're building it with the young people from the ground up, aren't you? So I think that really strengthens the impact of it going forward. And as you say, you get to a point where you're loud enough, and the impacts that you're having is so loud in those people's faces, it becomes, why wouldn't I be involved in this? This is amazing. But the work that you work, the kind of field that you work within, you must come across some kind of misconceptions around SEND within the spaces that you work in. What are some of those misconceptions, and how are you working to eradicate them? So
if I link it back just briefly to my teaching experience actually as well, and I noticed that across the different working in 2 different specialist schools, that at times we can by default maybe put barriers or ceilings is probably a better word, ceilings on young people, because they might have a disability. We might just think they're not going to be able to do that. And I think that is a misconception, because actually sometimes we can't see what they're capable of, but we just need to be patient and believe. So I think that's a misconception in itself, is kind of can only achieve so much, when I think there's so much more. And I think we should raise our kind of expectation standards, to link with that. In terms of them to the multi-schools work, you're right. So many misconceptions. I mean, from even now when we go into schools and, young people still believe that you can catch autism, for example. Like some people, we've had questions on that, like, can you catch it? Is it a disease even? And like we tackle every question with kind of real kind of openness. And we always say there's no such thing as a silly question, because, people are hearing that somewhere, they're picking it up. So, that's there. I think there is something around as well. Sometimes a fearfulness of, a young person's got a particular need. It means that they're going to hurt me, or they're going to be doing this. And actually, again, that's about understanding. I think a big one is that all young people are going to be the same. Like, they're all going to, if they've met a child with autism, that means every child is going to do A, B, and C, when actually we all know that autism is very different for every individual. So, I mean, I could go on and on. You're right. Misconceptions is the biggest reason of why we do Pillar 2, if I'm honest, because that is all about addressing it at an early age. And in its most simplistic form, again, just saying that all of our brains work in different ways. That's it.
I think it's really important to provide that space to ask those silly questions, because actually you're right, they're not silly questions. They're very real concerns, worries, musings from our young people. They have access, and this really links back to the mission behind Recap and why I do what I do. We have access to so much information online, but half of it isn't true. Half of it's coming from a bad place. You can't trust what you see online at face value. You have to be able to critique it and think, where's it coming from? Who's saying it? What's the evidence behind that? But our young people don't necessarily have that skill set yet either. So, but they have access to online, willy-nilly. And if it's not online, it's in the playground, or it's within, family circles or community circles, and, down the park and things like that. We work as human beings with communicating with one another, but with that comes this influx of information. And if you don't know how to discern what's true and what's not, it can pose for a really confused young person. So having that space to be able to ask that question safely and to be responded to in a caring, empathetic, honest and open way, and it's coming from a good place, I think that's really important. And that's really wonderful what you're doing in schools to be able to create those spaces, because it's really hard to reach a lot of people in a large way. So going to places like schools where you are finding groups of lots of young people to ask those questions and to educate on those things, then not only helps them, but helps them help others as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. I think that is the kind of world we're living in now, like you say, with online and social media, which is why the kind of misconception stuff is so important to kind of debug, because you're right, the mediums that they're picking these things up on. Even if I think of another example around kind of tics and Tourette's, or even stimming. Stimming's a big one in terms of, young people thinking that stimming is just one thing because they might have seen a TikTok video, when actually they need to understand it. So we cover that, because otherwise, like you say, the only information they're getting is a perspective on a platform that's popular amongst young people. So yeah, it's so key, and that's why we need to keep building that understanding.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, really, really valuable. Can you tell us a little bit about the Voices of the East initiative that you do?
Yeah, so I guess building from the three pillars and the model we've got, we started to join some regional kind of forums, which were all kind of adult heavy and all about kind of trying to, again, improve the SEND system. However, once I joined, I noticed there was nothing there around like young people. And I always struggle that I don't believe we can improve the SEND system unless you're talking with young people. I just don't think you can do it. So I just said, well, can we have some sort of young person forum group in there? They said, well, yeah, we can, but can you set it up? So, so was commissioned to then do that. And we now have Voice of the East, which the young people have named Voices of the East. And that's across 11 different local authorities in the east of England. And basically, if you think of Pillar 1, it's Pillar 1 online version, again, because you're covering so many different areas. And again, follows a similar format in terms of, we started with that blank piece of paper, what do you want the group to be about? They were very specific with this group, just to mention this point, that they wanted the regional space to be for SEND children, for a protected space for SEND children. The Multi-Schools Council, we have young people with all abilities. They don't have to have SEN to be involved. Right. So that's in every pillar. We have ambassadors who may not have SEN, but they might be a sibling or they might have a friend and they're really passionate.
Oh, amazing.
So whereas Voice of the East, young people told us they wanted that kind of protected space.
Right.
So that's what it is. And we've just started to develop it really. What that's enabled us to do is this year we held an event called the Big Get Together, which was really popular amongst young people. It's basically how it sounds. We were saying, we need a conference. And young people were saying, no, a conference, that sounds boring. So Big Get Together. And it basically was an opportunity for young people to come together, meet each other. They did some workshops all around mental health because that was their chosen focus. But they also spoke to leaders within every local authority. And we also had representation from the Children's Commissioner and also government as well, which was great. So we want to build on that. And what it's enabled us to do is talk to other local authorities about the MSc model. So we now have other areas that are taking the model on as well.
Amazing. See, it started already. People are like, why are we not involved?
Exactly. Yeah. Make the noise. Yep.
Yeah. Is that get together, is that something that's going to be like an annual thing, or was it a one-off?
Yeah, so one of my big bugbears is that sometimes there can be projects and things that are just thrown together and it's great that we've done it, a bit like we spoke about even before we came on, that you kind of do one thing and then you're like, what's next? Yeah. So I'm always banging on about sustainability, and actually we need, if this is successful, we need it to be sustainable. So we are in 2026, we're going to run 3 big get-togethers, actually potentially 4. The young people are just designing how they want them to look and be. And the hope is that we can continue shining the light on why their voices are important, but also bringing them together to create that community. What I'd love to come from that eventually, and it's no secret, is that we can get some centralized money that then properly invests in local areas being able to run something like the multi-schools, because that could be a barrier at the moment because local authorities are financially, under pressure. But actually, if we had a central pot, and what I keep saying, again, not to sound like a broken record, is, we do that for parent carer forums, which absolutely have their place. Again, not large amounts, but money that comes in to the system to help local areas develop their parent care forums. We should do exactly the same with young people, because their voices are just as valuable as parents. So that's the aim with it as well, is that if we can regionally, again, get louder and louder, show the impact of the model, that's the aim and outcome.
Fantastic. You're so passionate about it, and I love it. I can feel the passion through the screen, and it's really lovely to see, because young people, as fantastic as they are at giving their voice, they also need those advocates for them to help them on those platforms and help give them those kind of pathways through to the people that can make things happen. And you're one of those people. You're one of those advocates for them, and it's just amazing to see. You've worked in kind of SEND for, you said, over 17 years is a long time. What would you say your biggest lesson has been that you've learned about the SEND community in this time?
Cool, that's a really good question. My biggest lesson probably links back to my biggest lesson is to not kind of take one experience as every experience. Like, I think you have to be so open in the SEND system that everyone's going to have their own individual story, and it's about making sure that you don't ever kind of judge on what you might have seen or heard before, because I think it kind of decreases people's confidence in you and their want to engage with you if you just kind of say, oh, I know how you feel. Because I think statements like that can be really although well intended. Do we really know? Because we're not that person, we're not in their shoes. And I think what SEND education has taught me over the years is that it's so individual, and also not to judge young people on what the past might have been, because we always talk about kind of rewriting a young person's story for them, or if they want to rewrite it, in terms of they might have had very negative experiences in another setting or education, and actually believing in fresh starts, and believing that again every young person can kind of find a different path depending on if the environment's correct. So yeah, I think that all links together. I think it is just about not having judgment and being open and always willing to learn, because all of us are learning every single day.
Yeah, and everything consistently changes, doesn't it? And the more linking it back to research, which is where I'm at, that research is constantly evolving and happening, and we're learning new ways and new things about groups of people that we didn't know before that can help. So you're right, it's that constant evolution of our own knowledge and understanding is equally as important as well. And you are absolutely right when you say kind of it's a really hard place to be, isn't it? That boundary of showing empathy to somebody and saying, oh, I'm there with you, I know how you feel, but not minimizing their own individual experience of whatever's happened. And there's definitely a boundary there, and I think sometimes it can be quite hard to know where to place yourself, to want to show that empathy for it, especially if you've had a similar experience. But as you said, it's important not to minimize that individual's own experience. And we are all individual regardless of whether we have a SEND need or not. Every human experiences things in different way because of a multitude of different variables around them, and background and upbringing and everything around them. So it's hard to know. We don't know exactly how someone else feels, but it's that kind of support element is really important, I guess, with our young people. Where do you envisage SEND education is going? Where are we moving towards, and what kind of role do you hope that the MSc plays in that development?
I'll start with the second bit first, because that's probably easier to answer. I really hope that young people are central to those developments. Like I've said, I know people are kind of waiting for this white paper, and who knows when that will be published. But I think, like I said, I do firmly believe that if we're going to get the system right in the future, we need to be better engaging with young people locally to see what that feels like to them. And like in one of your earlier questions, that's young people with all abilities and from all diverse backgrounds as well. Really, really clear on that. So I think if we can start to do that better, then we've got more of a chance of creating something more inclusive. Because things that I keep hearing recently from quite a few leaders who are right is that one of the reasons there is so much pressure and possibly negativity around the SEND system is people's confidence in it, particularly parents, and understandably so, with some of the things that we hear and see from what young people tell us as well. So I think for me, one of the ways that you're going to improve the confidence is if you're working with young people and getting their voices central and getting them working on it. They are the young people, those that can, who are going home and telling, sometimes not all young people want to talk about their day, we know that, but young people who are then going home and showing their parents of how they feel in whatever way that may be. And if that's more positive, that's going to breed confidence. So I think that is, not just in itself, but is a key element to making sure we develop confidence in the system. I think for your first part of the question, where it's going is there has to be changes. We can't continue doing what we're doing. I think everybody acknowledges that. I think we're going to have to look differently around what we see. It sounds more radical maybe, but what we see is traditional education. I think hopefully most people would appreciate now that traditional education has maybe reached its sell-by date and we need to be thinking differently. So literally, just as I'm talking to you now, this week we've finished writing something called Missing Voices, where we visited young people in alternative provisions or those that might be out of education. And within that report, it mentions some of the adjustments they think could be made in mainstream provision. I think mainstream provision is going to have to look very different in a couple of years, 5 years, 10 years time. And that word alternative provision at the moment is sometimes tarred with a negative brush from what young people tell us. I couldn't access mainstream, so now I have to go to alternative. Alternative is for people who can't fit in. When actually, I think it's been that the system has been too rigid. So one of the sayings I always used to love is from one of the previous schools is, we don't expect them to fit in with us, we fit in with them. And that's where I think the system needs to go.
I could not agree with you more. And as you know, my research field is in home education and alternative education. So I'm very much in agreement with you on that. I think there should be less negativity around, you're having to go into an alternative because you didn't fit, and, embracing the multitude of ways that we can deliver education as a society to our young people. That's not going to look the same for everybody. Mainstream does have its place for some children and families. It does work for some children and families. I will never dispute that. And I think because I say that I research in home and alternative ed, people assume I'm anti-mainstream, and I'm absolutely not. I'm pro-education in the best way for that young person, but that's not always going to look like mainstream. So there needs to be better support, better resources, better funding for those alternative options so that they can continue to thrive and provide that environment with as much support, resource and funding, and not even just that, just that acknowledgement that it's a good enough place to be. It's not the alternative, it's not the other, it's not being othered in society. I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, but just the whole way people think about it without that negativity attached to it.
I think how you change that is the language you use, and I think you've just kind of basically touched on that. The fact that we use the word mainstream almost suggests to some that that's the way it should be.
Yes.
And actually that's not right. And again, when we've spoken to young people who have attended special schools, as they are called, special schools, some young people have said, what, the whole term special carries a negative connotation amongst their peers. So you change the language and you don't need to be using alternative mainstream. You just talk about education.
Yes.
And education is going to be different for every individual, because guess what? Every young person is different. So we're never going to reach a place where you have, absolutely tailored, individualized for every single, I appreciate that. However, you can have much more different pathways and routes and levels of assessment and all of that stuff, which we haven't got time to go into today. But the language, that's the start. You change the language, you start to change people's perceptions, understanding and thoughts.
Absolutely. And that isn't just within the conversations we're having. That's in the mainstream media, that's in policy, that's at government level. It's all the way through. It's not just how we're talking to our peers and within the school environment or the community. But you're right, that's a whole other conversation we do not have time for today. We'll put a pin in that and come back to it, because otherwise I'll get on my soapbox about that. But okay, so what advice would you give to other educators or community leaders that are wanting to foster that inclusion within their own areas?
So again, I guess it is to be open to listening to young people. Recently, one of my colleagues was talking about childism, how sometimes young people, adults can kind of have this approach where, again, it's not even sometimes kind of wanted, but just subconsciously, almost like that old thought of, oh, adults know best, or almost be worried about what young people are going to say about their environment or what it looks like. But actually, for me, again, it comes back to, I mentioned language, but communication is important in every aspect of life, isn't it? That when it comes to, trying to understand if something's working or not, we shouldn't be afraid to listen to young people, even if it's not what we particularly want to hear. Surely we'd rather want to hear that to know how we can improve it than just ignore it and sweep it under the carpet. Because going back to a few moments ago when I said about breeding confidence in the system, if you don't tackle these things head on and connect with young people, you're only going to breed kind of more anxiety, uncertainty. People are going to lose confidence in the system. So I think making sure that you're open, being accepting of change. And like we mentioned earlier, things are different now. You touched on social media, and there's so many different influences, and we need to move with the times. And
yes.
I think that's maybe why we're not being as inclusive as we could be, because we haven't moved forward with the times enough. And partly that's because things have moved forward so quickly,
Yes.
So it's not, I'm not, again, attaching so much blame. So we're almost playing catch up now. But I think that is it. And I think just, again, emphasizing what I said a few moments ago too, that recognizing every story is individual. And, a lot of the time, I always say, as much as we can't always fully understand, try and put yourselves in other people's shoes. And I know I'm here to talk about young people, but I always say, if you were a parent and you had a child who was really finding it difficult and felt like they wasn't being included and couldn't access their education, how would you feel as a parent? And so, it's important to reflect on that, and that's not me trying to create like an entitlement culture, because that's not right either. We also need to know what is achievable and, and all work together rather than it be services and parents. It's about coming together. So, I think I've said a few bits there, but again, it's in the heart of making sure we listen to young people.
And I think you're right as well when you say, don't be afraid if they're going to say something that isn't working or something that's wrong, because, there's a whole conversation now about how important, quote, failure is and how we learn from things that don't go to plan. And, there are some big kind of entrepreneurs out there that have like heads of failure and things like that in their teams, because it's having that confidence to try and then evaluate what worked, what didn't, and then move forward and not be afraid to kind of fail on something, because actually that's a really good learning opportunity to get better at it, isn't it? And young people are probably the best people to tell you when you're doing it wrong as well.
100%. Like, I know I've spoken really positively about the multi-schools model and stuff on here today, but we have made mistakes along the way. There are things that haven't gone well that young people have told us, but what I would like to think is that we've been open to that, and in the future there'll be other things that we don't get right. So you're absolutely right. I think it's important to accept that.
So for anyone who's listening who's got really, really excited about hearing about what you're doing, whether they're a young person, a parent, a school, somebody involved in education, how can they find out more and how can they get involved?
So I guess in terms of the finding out more, we've got our website, which again, if you just search the Multi-Schools Council online, that will come straight up. We also have our social media platform, so we try and do a lot on there. Again, based on what young people have said, it's a good way to reach. So a bit more old school, according to young people, we do still use Facebook, because in terms of engaging with parents and getting the messages to parents, that still really works for us. We're on Instagram. We are kind of looking at how we develop TikTok, but in a way that isn't tokenistic that we're just saying, we're on there, because ultimately it also needs to be meaningful. So I'd say that still needs to be developed, but Instagram, Facebook, our website, again, personally on LinkedIn, so are able to share stuff on there as well. We just try and share it anywhere we can. And then in terms of actually, if you wanted to go further and get involved, email address wise, we've got our kind of core email, which is mschoolscouncil@gmail.com. So you can send stuff in there, and then depending on where you are in the country or whatever you want to get involved in, we can redirect you to the appropriate place. But yeah, I guess just to emphasize that, we're open to working with anybody and everyone. So yeah, if you want to get involved, please do.
Brilliant. And what I'll do is I'll put some links to all of that underneath the episode so people can find it really easy and just click through and come and contact you. Right, I'm going to give you the last word. I'm going to leave it over to you with an empowering message or something that you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today.
I think it's, again, linking it back to why we started the Multi-Schools Council in terms of how we listen to young people, is to what we were just saying, to not be afraid to listen to their thoughts and feelings. Because for me, the only way we're going to improve the confidence, the inclusive culture, the inclusive practices is if we involve them from the very start. So don't be afraid to engage with them. Be open to everybody's kind of thoughts and feelings, and work together as well. I think there's so many people that want to improve things, to kind of look what's out there and learn from each other. So and also just to say a massive thank you to you, Lucy, as well, for letting us come on here and spread the word.
Not at all. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and sharing the amazing work you're doing. Honestly, I cannot express enough how wonderful it is what you're doing, and hearing more about it today has just made me super excited and wanting to get involved myself. So we're going to be having a conversation to see how I can get more involved as well. But thank you so much for coming on and giving your time today and sharing it, and I wish you all the very best for the future.
Thanks, Lucy.